Welcome to our final event of our BAF Mini Fest, a town hall style accessibility panel on the arts. Before we get started, I'd like to do a land acknowledgement. We would like to acknowledge the Mi'kmaq people whose ancestral and unceded territory we are gathered upon today. This territory is covered by the Treaties of Peace and Friendship. This land continues to be home to diverse Indigenous people, First Nations, Métis, and Inuit, who we recognize as stewards of the land and vital contributors of this society. So I'll pass it over to our moderator, Vicky, and she'll introduce herself, and everyone will introduce themselves as we go. Enjoy.
Okay. Hi, everybody. As she said, my name is Victoria Levac, and I will be your moderator for this afternoon's panel. I'm very excited. We have a very diverse group of artists today, and I look forward to our conversation. I think it'll be very fruitful. So, the first question we have here is for you guys to introduce yourself and your organization and just describe to us what compelled you to join us today. We'll start with Tara.
Okay.
Tara, sorry.
Thank you, Vicki. Hi, everybody. I'm Tara Taylor, and I'm the manager of community navigation for Lighthouse Arts Center, and that's actually where our panel today is taking place within the TV studio. So we are comprised of basically 3 divisions. So we have a streaming service called Lighthouse Go, and we also have our co-working space where creatives can come and be amongst one another, learn from one another, create together, and then overall we have the TV studios and a performance hall that will seat 750 and stand 1150. But overall, arts and entertainment. And I was drawn to being on this panel, was invited by my coworker, Ryan Valmeier, you'll hear from, and just also very intrigued at the idea of being diverse in the art of all forms, because I work in theater, I work in film, music, and we're striving to have that diversity in all ways. That means cultural diversity, that means age diversity, that means disability diversity, all of it. So I'm very excited to have this conversation. So thank you for having me today.
Kat, you're next.
Thank you. I'm Kat McKagan, and I am the Executive Director at Theatre Nova Scotia. So we provide support services and various resources to the live theatre sector here in Nova Scotia. And so we're supporting both the community as well as the professional theatre sector. And then within some of our programming, we have 3 major programs that we run annually, being the Robert Merritt Awards, the High School Drama Festival, as well as the Perform Festival. So a lot of them about recognition, getting out into the communities, doing the arts within the various communities, and bringing, such as the Drama Fest, bringing youth in and having them experience it as well. So for me, I think one of the interests today and just in general is really how do we continue to increase accessibility and diversity within the arts, and the live performing arts is where my interest is. Within our membership at Theatre Nova Scotia, we have so many different companies doing different things, and the needs of the audiences as well, the companies, are very, very different depending on what venue we're in or what production they're trying to put up. So I'm really interested to kind of continue having that conversation about how do we keep making those spaces accessible.
Okay. Laura.
Great. Hi, everybody. I'm Laura Mckenzie. I'm the Executive Director of Screen Nova Scotia. We are a film commission and industry association, and we're responsible for selling Nova Scotia as a destination for filming, as well as talent development and advocacy. I am compelled to be here because I really think that the screen industry could potentially play, or does play, a huge role in influencing, a change. So, we are responsible and a leadership role. Excuse me. We take a leadership role in supporting, who tells stories, and which stories get made. So I take that very seriously, and I think it's really exciting that we can take this on together. So thanks for having me.
Lamia.
Hi, everyone. My name is Lamia. I'm an artist, storyteller, in my own art practice. I'm also the executive director of TV Theatre Company, which is a company that's pivoted to creating great works and touring work internationally. And I'm also the chair of Underneath Art Society. And Underneath it's bringing together artists to create art together for professional artists. And all of the different hats that I wear in my world around art development and commitment to art programming in the community is because I want to see change and diversity, inclusion, and empowerment within this industry and in this sector. I think that Nova Scotians have a lot to offer the world in terms of creative stories, and I'm really happy to be a part of these discussions and also to be working in leadership positions. And I'm all about building community, and so I'm thankful for the opportunity to be here today to contribute to this conversation.
Thank you. Ryan, we're to you next.
Sure. I am Ryan Valmeier. I'm the manager of The Link, which is a creative incubator for business and artists inside the Lighthouse Arts Centre. And Tara explained everything really well for the overall center, so I won't repeat everything there. But also importantly for me, I'm a musician and I've been an artist for many years myself, and co-founded and ran Youth Art Connection, supporting youth in the arts for the last 10 years before I came to work over here at Lighthouse. And for me, I felt definitely compelled to have this conversation today. In particular, I guess for Lighthouse, knowing that we're about to open a major facility for the arts and a hub and an incubator with not-for-profits, artists, small businesses, as well as productions. So like Tara and I and the rest of our team have been working really hard to, as much as possible, build this in a way that's in partnership with community, with other organizations, and being here, especially listening to what the folks in the audience have to say and the questions that you can ask us. That's super important for us to try to get as much right as we can before we open. Because just being, I feel a lot of responsibility helping shape a new major facility and some infrastructure for the arts in Halifax. So that's definitely part of my commitment, is to be here today for that, as well as just kind of hear what all these other really important leaders have to say from the arts community.
Excellent. Dale, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Dale Shefford. It's great to be here. I work at the Art Gallery of Nova Scotia, and I'm the curator of education and public program. But I have a real focus on community engagement. This has been my passion, I think, my entire life. It's wonderful to be here with everybody. Part of the reason I was compelled to come here, or the gallery, was just so much, as we all know, is about relationship building and partnerships. And I know some of the people on the panel, and I'm not quite sure who's out there in cyberspace watching this, but we all know how important conversations are about these kinds of things, and knowing that there's a really positive feeling about us working together towards building a more inclusive space where people will have opportunities and feel comfortable going into the kinds of spaces and things we're offering together and complementing each other. I'm really excited about that. We're getting a new, the art gallery is the Provincial Art Gallery. We have over 18,000 works in our collection. So we're trying to diversify that and look at our history and examine the structures that we have that make it not so inclusive. So we're really, really working hard, and we are in an exciting phase like you, where we're working towards a new building on the waterfront, and it's sort of site specific. And so we're really trying to take what we've done, which is strong, but really recognize all the gaps and all the learnings we can do. And that's going to come from everybody, not just from the people who work at the gallery.
Yeah, that's tremendous. Jake, last but not least, of course.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jake Ivany. I'm the Operations and Membership Coordinator at IATSE Local 849. That's the International Alliance for Theatrical and Stage Employees. It's an international union that represents almost 100,000 people between the United States, Canada, and Mexico. And we're Local 849. So we represent motion picture technicians in the Maritime Provinces. That's Nova Scotia, PEI, and New Brunswick. We have about 400 technicians that are members, and another 500 or so that are considered referrals or non-members, people that work on production but don't quite have the qualifications to get into membership yet. We represent 18 different departments in the industry. We we have our members working on a lot of the big productions that come in. Not every show that shoots in Nova Scotia is a unionized production, but a lot of the bigger ones that you'll see, most recently Chapelwaite, you might have seen online, Digstown, Moonshine, the big ones and some of the local ones are unionized. So that's kind of where I'm coming from. In my personal life, I'm also a filmmaker, an artist, a youth facilitator. So I'm excited to be here because the union has been very much not front and center in the past. We've kind of been this elusive entity, and especially over some studies that have happened over the past few years, that's become very apparent that there's a lot of misconceptions about what the union does and what we are able to offer, and how to work in the film industry. So we are excited to be more out there and available. Yeah.
Now, this is the one where you all get to brag a little bit, so it's going to be fun before we get into the hard stuff. So, again, Tara, we'll start with you. But the question is, and I guess anybody can answer this. If you don't have an answer, that's cool too. What are some changes you've made over the last few years to create more accessibility, inclusion, and diversity to the local arts community?
Bragging indeed. I guess with my coworkers and folks that I work with, we've created mentorship programs where we've taken some Black and Brown folk and we've trained them in the film industry for film crew. So we had people learning lighting, sound, costume, makeup, those kinds of departments. That they were taught all of the departments, but those are just the few that they went into. A couple of them went to work on Digstown. A few of them went to work on a production called Working While Black that was out of Ottawa. And so that was our pilot. So what we literally want to do is just add in the numbers. Screen Nova Scotia has done a beautiful report that Laura may talk about later that basically confirmed that the fact that we know that the numbers are not large in the underrepresented voices communities. And so we're very proud to actually physically run something that was supported by Telefilm, and Lighthouse Arts Centre is going to take that model and build on it and just keep on building up the numbers from the community. So very proud of that fact.
Excellent. Yeah, what about theater?
So within theater, and within the kind of worlds that I live within theaters, I've been doing a lot of work around programming, and it's really conscious choices within programming in terms of who's in the room, who are we bringing into the room, and who are we making sure to make space for within that room. So one of the kind of values that I try to put forward in the programming that we're doing now is not waiting for people to ask for needs or waiting for people to ask to be invited, but making the space kind of accessible, or reaching out to people and saying, hey, what can we do to welcome you in better? What can we do to make sure that you feel comfortable to be in this room? And so how can we really work together as a community that way? So really a lot of programming in that sense. And then the other one that we have coming up now is, again, actually similar mentoring programs that we have coming up, looking at how do we really build kind of the next generation, help that skills development around arts producers and arts management, and partnering kind of emerging artists with established professionals so that we can do that skills development, and making sure that skills development is really going into those underrepresented communities so that they have opportunities, so that everyone has those opportunities going forward.
Excellent. Laura?
Sure. So the first thing that we did out of the gate last year, when it became very clear that we were going to have to get involved in reducing barriers in a very real way, was, like Tara said, commissioned the study that looked at employment trends for diverse individuals in the film industry. And it looked at, trends, barriers, that sort of things, and actions for change. And I think obviously it is a very dense study, and you can find it on our website if you want to have a look at it. But it really highlighted the fact that in Nova Scotia, access for diverse individuals is proportionately lower than in the workforce across Canada. So we're not doing very well. So So that was a really good sort of starting point. It did come with 6 very strong recommendations in the report for change, which we've already started to implement. So the first one that we did was a diversity mentorship program, where we put 12 people through an internship program, which gave them each 4 weeks on a professional film set. So we did, also Digstown and Moonshine, This Hour is 22 Minutes, and other shows as well. It was a great program. We actually only had funding for 4 individuals to go through it. And we received 14 incredible applications, like really strong individuals that were not going to get into the film industry on their own. They just didn't have that skill set, but they were strong individuals. And so, within, I think, about a week, I was able to raise another $50,000 in funding just by calling government and saying, hey, we have these people, we can't let this opportunity pass us by. And it's the fastest I've ever been able to get government funding for anything. And to me, that was just so encouraging, right? So that was a great thing that happened. And then I guess, as we were kind of moving down this journey with our outreach committee at Screen Nova Scotia, we kind of realized that we're going to have to start looking at like the makeup of Screen Nova Scotia. What are the, systemic and institutional barriers that are there? How can we really kind of tease apart the organization, look at our policy, look at how we operate, and kind of bake access reduction into our organization? Right, so looking at our programs and services and who can access them and what are our eligibility guidelines. We introduced a new membership tier, which is an accessible tier. It's only $10, and this is for anybody that wants to be is interested in the film industry or working in the film industry. But under this tier, anybody who also identifies as diverse can also access any program that happens at Screen Nova Scotia. So if you want to be part of our writers internship program, by all means, if you want anything that you want to do, you can do it under that membership tier. So, our hope is that we're going to be able to really increase our numbers in membership and start kind of accessing new members, bringing new people, new writers, new faces, new stories into the fold. It's gone quite well so far. We've increased our membership quite a bit under this new tier, so that's exciting. The other thing that we did that I thought was, really important is last year we were in the process of actually launching a new production guide for our film industry, and so all of these conversations were happening at the same time, and so we decided to introduce self-identifiers into our production guide. So now at Screen Nova Scotia, you can basically search for, Black, Indigenous, person of color. And then even, subgroups in there, African Nova Scotia. Tara was a big help on this with me. The one thing I will say, and, we'll get into this a little bit more, is that, as a leader of an organization who doesn't identify as diverse, it is a very interesting road to go down. And I'm so grateful for the support of my outreach committee and the people in the community who have been there. And I hope we all get a chance to talk about this today. Yeah.
Lamia, what about you? What are some of your triumphs over the years?
Yeah, there's been so much change and opportunity in my world the past year or two, particularly in the arts. And I think that it started because I really said that I wanted that. And so I think there's a part of my reflection that there is a lot of systemic changes and new perspectives being, getting more voice. But there also was such a personal process in this and really wanting to take on the work to make things better. I think there's when you come from a community that is, experiencing an inequity, it does take a lot of power and motivation to fight for things. And so I think there's been a lot of, and kind of my message and wanting to share, with the audience and folks today is to kind of really push for the changes that we want, because I think that now is a perfect time. To Be Theatre, for example, knew that they wanted to go in a different direction and specifically designated their executive director role for an African Nova Scotian person. And so, that opened up an opportunity for me to apply because I hadn't considered working for a theater company before. So I think there are like little ways big ways, little and big, that, those changes can happen. And I've definitely been a part of that. Wonderneath Art Society moved into a beautiful, accessible building. And that was a lot of hard work. So I think over the past, our team worked so hard to continue, and it's just the beginning in some way. So I think there's lots, and I think this is kind of relates to a question that we'll talk about later, but there's so much work to do. But I think, just like some of those big moves around, like, hiring, acquiring truly accessible space, and then asking questions about what does accessibility even mean, for the folks that we're trying to engage, because that conversation means something so deep and personal to everybody. So how do we open up to keep it from everyone, so that we can build spaces that reflect and are comfortable for everyone. So that's big work, but it's been very fun work and very rewarding.
Excellent. Ryan?
Yeah, thanks. Well, programming, is probably the funnest thing to talk about. And Tara talked a bit about one of the pilots that she ran already at Lighthouse, even before we're really fully open. So working on developing programs in partnership, I think, is really key for us. We're not trying to reinvent the wheel. So trying to, as much as possible, collaborate with other organizations, with communities, with new projects, to be able to identify really cool solutions and ideas that will be able to run programming in exciting and collaborative ways. When I'm talking about programming, we're looking at things around entrepreneurship in the arts, developing skill in the arts, employability, and that kind of a thing. And then there's 3 levels that I always think about this stuff on, which is, the large systemic challenges and problems that we can contribute towards impacting with programming or other things. Working in community right now, what can we be doing immediately, every day? What differences can we make even now before we're fully open, and then once we're open especially? But then there's another whole part of things that I find after running a small charity for 10 years, you learn a lot doing things right and making mistakes and learning from those. To understand what's all the kind of behind the scenes things that are really important to try to do in an organization, especially since we're just building one right now, right? Making sure there's strong strategies and policies being developed, informed by community, whether it's looking at fighting anti-Black racism, including people with disabilities, whichever things we're trying to take on as an organization, as a company, trying to build in those practices and processes. And maybe I'll just finish, like, one of the cool innovations I think that we've been working on is that Tara last year, when she was on the board at Lighthouse, really helped transform what started off as a diversity and inclusion committee into something a little bit different. First, by renaming that into the Collective of Voices Committee. And then we gave it a bit of a different role. So what we've been doing is really recruiting onto this committee some folks that we give an honorarium to spend a bit of time with us, helping us at the very beginning of decisions, whether we're talking about hiring, programming, physical buildings, funding strategies, all these big picture things that you have to think about running an organization, making sure we have folks at the table, even if we don't yet have representation in the company from all these different parts of our community that are really important to us. We have this committee that looks at things before we launch, right? So at the design phase, at the idea phase, at the let's do this phase. And I just think that's so important that extremely early on, you get ideas tested and vetted a bit, so that by the time they're implemented, we can, as much as possible, make sure those are informed by community. So that Collective of Voices Committee has been really interesting, thinking about bringing in voices and bringing people to the table, not in necessarily a governance way, but in a collaborative way where you can really get those ideas in and also have a bit of accountability held for your work, even before it launches. Anyway, I'll talk about it all day I'll cut myself off there, but that behind the scenes stuff is really exciting, as well as all the programming that we get to talk about eventually.
Exciting times. There is so much. I know, listening to Ryan and others and Lamia, there's just so much going on. And I think one of the changes, not just the last couple of years, but I think before that, because of the times as well, we're sort of looking at personal and professional growth and just going, wow, there's so much we need to learn and understand, and time for action. And like you were saying, Ryan, making mistakes, but knowing, okay, that's okay, but got to be accountable for it. And how do we move forward, and how do we move forward together? And I know the Art Gallery, it is an institution that's been around in Nova Scotia for a long time. And there's many people that don't even think of coming to the Art Gallery or accessing the programs. And there's a lot of exciting stuff that we've done and build with partners, but we need to do more. We need to get out there. There's so many gaps. But it's been really exciting over the last few years. We've really diversified and looked at different approaches, even towards acquiring artworks and thinking about the collection and which works are missing, who's making those decisions about what works are being shown, what stories are being told, how is our history of being told through the artworks and through the programs. We have some, like if you walked into the gallery now, it's incredible. The artwork that's up. There's really exciting shows that are by diverse artists. We have an amazing show right now with Letitia Fraser, Darcy Bernhard, and Nelson White. We've got a total rehang of the Indigenous collection, which was curated by our Indigenous programmer, Aidan Gillis, and he's brought in and worked not just himself with his gallery colleagues, but people in terms of in terms of the design of the exhibition. They're done by people that come from that lived experience and that background, so Indigenous designers even for the shows. So we're really trying to, address interest issues that are relevant to the community through our exhibitions, through our programming, through our acquisitions. Coming from a programming background, there's just a launch this week of a podcast that is totally. We're helping program it, but we're not the ones in control. It's actually stories that are being told by the community, not just the people that are working at the gallery. And so working with sort of building kind of programs, but building trusting partnerships so we can all do really great work together in the visual arts and beyond in the general arts. But again, I think it's that the necessity and the commitment and the need to be accountable and more transparent in the way we're working. And in everything we do, this needs to, inclusivity, diversity needs to be the center of our work. And we sometimes forget about that, and we have to we're pulled back in and go, whoa, I got it wrong. Because we go back to old patterns sometimes, and then you realize, no, that can be exclusive. So how am I going to do it differently? But instead of thinking that we have all the answers, the staff and people that are, very immersed in the gallery, reaching out and realizing that there's a whole community, there's a big extended community. And that has been we've had such rich learning. It's been hard. It's been powerful. Sometimes you feel like you want to give up or why am I working at an institution? But it's really exciting because we all know we have to change, and we need to measure that, not just the impact, but the change and our willingness to do that, the commitment. And the gallery is really ready to do that. With its community, its extended community. Provincial programs were fantastic during the COVID and beyond, the virtual offerings. Our established community programs like our afternoon shift with Underneath, we're expanding it, the model. So we're not only having an open studio for young people with mental health challenges, which is so prevalent these days and has been, but we're now having, with the funding we have, received together with Wonderneath. We're going to have an open studio for young people with challenges around mental health at the Art Gallery, but also Wonderneath. And then we're also going to be doing a pilot in Preston with Lamia. And, those kinds of things, just reaching out and making the whole, like I said, the Art Gallery of Nova Scotia, it's all of ours, but people don't feel that. So it's about time we just really start making some action.
I didn't even know you guys offered programs. I thought you just showed pictures. Like legit. I thought they were just photos on the wall.
Yeah.
I didn't know there was other stuff.
Yeah, that's the thing. Yeah.
Because that's cool.
And we do amazing programming, but a lot of people don't know about it or haven't even
certainly
stepped
didn't.
in. So now you need to come.
Now that I know about it, I will
Yes.
Jake.
Yeah. So we at Local 849, we've done a number of things over the past few years. I've only been at the organization for about 2.5 years, but I am extremely excited to be making a lot of the changes that we are. For those of you who don't know, in 2015, there was a shift in our incentive, which really affected unionized production. It was really devastating. Our membership dropped significantly. Our office went from a staff of 6 or 7 down to 3. So we've been slowly building back up, and these past 2 years have really been great because now we're able to recruit in a new way, different than what we've done before. So when I started, a massive priority of mine, our website is the number one place that people go to find information on how to get work, how to apply, how to learn more about the industry. And it was a bit of a mess. So we have tightened up a lot of our content. I think we've increased transparency in a lot of ways by putting everything out there. There's no secrets. We're very transparent about what we've been doing. And one of the things that was actually identified in the diversity study that Screen Nova Scotia did is that there have been some barriers to membership. And so in a lot of ways, that signified to us that we haven't been putting ourselves out there enough because we have some of the lowest membership requirements in the country. We have some of the fastest membership periods. So by the time you put in your application to when you actually get membership, we're the cheapest in the country. So we're finding that by being more public and transparent about what we already are and what we do, not saying that we are the most inclusive organization to walk the face of the earth. We definitely still have a lot of work to do, but a lot of those barriers that are perceived to exist, they don't exist. And I think there's a lot of rumors about the role of unions and guilds, and how to get membership and how to get work. So that's part of why I'm here today, is to try to clarify that and open up a discussion with the public and make sure people know that it's possible to get work. Another thing we did this year is we host a set etiquette course. That's a requirement, one of our very few requirements to actually list as a permittee or referral to list to get work. It's a 1-day course. We've been hosting it online. We made it free this year. It was $20 before. It's now free. We're looking at what will happen next year, but for the whole year of 2021, it was free, and we hosted more courses than we ever have before. For instance, in 2019, we hosted 10 courses, totaling about 100 people. And in 2021, we've hosted 25 courses, and over 500 people have actually taken the course. Since 2019, our referral list has grown from 100 to over 500 now. So we've been actively recruiting. Part of the reason why we haven't done that, obviously, is because the work wasn't there. It's hard to say, come work in the film industry when there's not work for people to do. So we're really trying to ramp that up. And we also launched a trainee program this year, which is brand new. Some IATSE locals in Canada have versions of trainee programs. So we finally were able to get our own. It's still being tested. There's a lot of bugs to work out. And because we represent so many different departments, it's not a one-size-fits-all situation. So we're still trying to get to a point where we can really promote that. But it's in the works. And I think after this production season coming up in 2022, we're really going to have a better grasp on what that looks like long-term. But a big part of that is, of course, producer buy-in. So much of what we do is influenced by what productions do. We represent employees, but there are certain things that we don't have control over as a union, legal things. So there are a lot of things that are actually in the.
Sorry, I'm gonna
Yeah.
cut you out there because our next question
Yeah.
is about said barriers. So there, I want to make sure we have time for all of the audience to ask questions. So I'm gonna try to make this one a little easier to answer. Other than money and the fact that Halifax is old and doesn't have many disability-friendly buildings, both for wheelchairs and other mobility devices, what are some other barriers you faced to making it easier for people with disabilities specifically to access the arts community?
Knowledge.
Knowledge.
You just let us know you didn't even know that the art gallery had programs. It's the knowledge, like it's that outreach piece. You need to get your legs into the street, into into the communities, and let folks know what you have going on.
Right. Kat?
Yeah, and I'd say it's also, for me, within a provincial organization, it's also knowing or understanding the responsibility of leading by example. So making very conscious choices within the programming that Theatre Nova Scotia is doing in hopes that might kind of drive similar programming and similar value sets within the larger community.
Laura?
Ignorance, specifically my own. I think that this is a bit of a big one that's not really spoken about enough, which is that all of a sudden, overnight, we all decided that we were going to change the way we operate in the world. And I think it was Me Too, Black Lives Matter, obviously, that made that change. And at that point, all of us leaders who have never had to think about this had to really get vulnerable. And we had to say, oh, I don't know what to do. Yeah. I don't know how to do this. And so then we all made the mistake of going out and tapping every diverse person that we knew to say, teach me. Yeah. Well, that's ridiculous. We are, obviously prejudice and stereotype is a people problem, but racism is a white person problem. And it's our cross to bear. And it's our job to educate ourselves. It's not our job to go out and say, tell me how to fix this problem. They've been telling us since the dawn of day how to fix the problem. And so I made a lot of mistakes, which is okay. Again, you just be accountable and you wake up and you go, oh, I get it now, right? I get why that's not okay. And you reach out to people that are in, positions that can help you with that kind of information, and you pay them for it. And there was so much learning, right? So much learning in such a short period of time that we all had to go through. And I think for me, it felt like a really, it felt like a very solo journey. And I have to imagine that I'm not the only person in a leadership role in the cultural sector that has also felt that solo journey. And I think that it's important that we support each other. So, not just us supporting each other and talking about, what are you doing and how are you doing it? It's also getting involved with our government and our stakeholders and partners and saying, take a leadership role in activating and incentivizing, barrier reduction in arts organizations. It's not something that we should be trying to develop, ideas that we should be trying to develop from a grassroots perspective. It needs to be regulatory, right? This stuff needs to be regulatory. If you're accessing arts funding from Communities, Culture, and Heritage, they should be mandating that your programs are have diversity benchmarks. They need to be met. They need to be looking at your policies and breaking them down and forcing change.
Yeah. Lumia, do you have anything to add to what's already been said?
I'll put it's all really resonating, and I think time and space is something. Timelines are always the pressure of trying to do things quickly. I think that that's where we go wrong. We try to, fit things into, and so I think that's the barriers. Like, how do we kind of, when we know that these funding cycles and all the system is already running in this way that that really needs disruption. And I think that that's what is the barrier, is that sometimes we don't slow down enough to have the full conversation. We don't do that work that it takes to call the person who we're not seeing, So I think that there's so much in the way that we have to approach this different. And I think that I've definitely benefited from being now in a leadership position, being able to change those timelines a little bit, or to ask those questions and to get a little bit deeper in terms of the level of care and considerations that we're bringing to everything that we do. So I feel like it's the ways that I'm approaching the barriers now is a little bit different because I have the power to make some decisions, so it is really deeply related to power and people who are in positions that know that they're not representing the best interest because they don't know it. I think that there's always ways to make space for connections, and I think that that's kind of what I'm hoping that we do more of, which is also really hard to do in this reality of the pandemic and people feeling safe or not. Like, I think there's a lot of ways that we've actually taken steps backwards, but I'm also really hopeful that now that folks have a little bit more of a willingness to come to the discussion and to the questions that folks who've been excluded have been faced with forever, there seems to be a sense of openness to change, but it's still going to be really hard work because we still need to talk to everyone to understand, what is it going to take, for you to feel like you can come to this program and that you can have involvement, and what is it that you want to see. And that's going to require that the mainstream and the status quo, actually have to let go of some stuff, right? So I think that that's kind of the transition that we're in. Yeah, and it's hard. It's been really challenging. So the barriers continue. That's all I have to say about that. But I think we're building more capacity to be able to work through them.
Right? Anything to add?
Yeah, just to build on Lamia's points, just two things she mentioned that I agree with, especially around this has lots to do with power and relationships. Because I think a lot of the time the way you navigate access to leadership and to power in the arts sector, like other sectors, is through networks, right? Through building professional networks and through building relationships. And you do that by volunteering on boards, going to events, going to, really just being around and getting involved, meeting as many people as possible, right? So if you're someone with a whole range of different disabilities, there's any number of reasons why even just physically being in the room may be a challenge, right?
Exactly.
Right? Let alone all the other barriers that also exist for a whole range of types of disabilities. So how do you make a relationship? How do you get the network? How do you get access to these circles and all this power if you can't even be in the room, and people don't know you to invite you? If you're being judged and not all of your power and your brilliance is not being captured because of stereotypes. So all these layers of things just means people don't get access to those relationships and the networks in which you have to have in order to be able to influence and to be put, to get yourself into leadership positions to make change. So to me, it's those relationships that are at the basis of everything, whether you want to call it business and professional networks or personal relationships. So to me, we need to really lean into all those relationships with a focus on, disseminating power to a larger variety of leaders.
Dale, go ahead.
Yeah, I just I'm in agreement with all of this. Sometimes just looking too inward and not getting out. Like you were saying, Tara, not sitting at your desk doing Zoom calls, thinking your work's so important, but not really getting out there. And consequently, the lack of understanding of even how to even approach it, because there's just so many different perspectives that are different than my own. So I think that's a barrier. In other words, the barrier can be myself or ourselves. And I think the lack of people resources, but also the lack of diversity in the workforce. And, the government, Nova Scotia government's doing really well trying to have programs and ways, more accessibility, diversity. But it's hard because a lot of these things in government, in the hiring practices, and we know with people with certain credentials and in the past and continually, we're starting to make changes in terms of hiring and possibilities, even where we send out messages or advertisements or whatever job postings. Used to always sort of be through these sort of conventional channels, so people wouldn't even know about the fact that we had a new job offering. But there's just a lot of barriers in terms of getting staff in that are diverse, and then also the training. So they may have, someone may come in and have a lot of great experience. They may not know so much about this, but there can be training for that. And that's true with anybody, no matter what background you come from. It's about building a team. So it's just kind of opening up that, the whole idea of hiring, getting more diversity, not just working with diverse partners, but having people really in the sort of in governance and on staff that actually are diverse as well in many different ways. Yeah, and I know I'm doing some community engagement around diversity. A friend of mine who has MS was saying, I was talking to her about accessibility, and she said, "Why do we have to do all the hard work? Why do you have to make it so hard for us?" And she wasn't just talking about the art gallery, she's talking about just in generally. So some of those changes we need to make so people can even have access to get in the door.
One does not simply walk into the art gallery.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
Jake.
Yeah, completely agree with everything that everyone has said. I think one of the biggest tangible barriers that we've been facing, and that I think people trying to get into the industry have been facing, is transportation. It became so very crystal clear, not only when we were getting our trainees onto production, but we helped Screen Nova Scotia place their folks if they were in our departments, and it was very very real, the barrier that transportation in this province is. The films frequently have 6 a.m. call times. You'll work a 16-hour day, so you're not getting out of there till friggin' 10 p.m. Public transportation is mostly out of the question because we're in a studio in Burnside. We're in Avondale, an hour outside the city. Where cabs are not a thing in this province, really. It's just it becomes very, if you do not have a driver's license and you do not have access to a vehicle, it becomes very difficult. So that's been a huge barrier for us that we've been trying to navigate and figure out solutions for. It's great when they're just doing a studio day in Burnside because it's easier. At least it's a consistent location. Usually they're shorter days, but if they're shooting a little bit outside the city, it gets really tough. So that's and that is for people without physical disabilities, let alone we haven't placed anyone yet with physical disabilities. So I can't imagine the barriers that would be there at this time. Severe.
Excellent. Okay. And because I want us to have time to answer the audience questions, I'm going to skip this question. I'm sorry, guys, but it seems very similar to the one I just asked. So we're skipping it because I'm in charge. So lastly, before we get into our lovely audience questions, okay, this is a fun one. I'm really excited for this. In an ideal world, so you go to your utopia in your brain, okay? What would you like to see your organizations and others do to create an accessible, inclusive, and diverse arts community? Tara?
Okay. In my utopia, we're going to work our efforts out of existence. So that just simply means that it's going to be a lived practice where we're just doing the thing. We're just doing it.
Okay, Kat?
Excitement to be involved. So rather than worrying about the ifs or the how do I get theirs or can I participate or will I be welcome in the room or any of those other barriers that are occurring, just a pure, genuine excitement to be involved because those barriers have been dismantled.
Excellent. Laura?
Yeah, that's a good one. I guess in the film industry, my utopia is that we are able to find a way to really access new stories and find a way to put programs and in place where we can get not only those stories but those story creators, those story writers into the film industry. I really believe that the cultural industries have such a unique role to play in changing how the world thinks, right? Everything that we do, you think about, a community, it has a culture. You think about Nova Scotia has a culture, Canada has a culture. This is how the public that watch media understand who we are as a community. So we have a very big role to play in how we strategically make decisions to bring people into the spotlight, right? New writers, new storytellers. It's really important that we just be very, very strategic about every decision that we make, because I think that's the only way to not just affect change in your local community, but to change hearts and minds around the world, right? Which is about what you need to do in order to actually get to a utopia, right? So yeah, that's what I want to see.
Lamia?
In my community or within my network, we often have this saying like everybody eats, and so that means that there's enough resources that everybody is taken care of in terms of their needs. It's mostly talked about within a financial perspective, but then I also think that it relates to actual physical eating and access to food, and I can't not think about the foundation of those needs being met, in my utopia, and also just the sense of that, that there is something for everyone, and that everybody has the opportunity to express and to be nourished and full. So that's really what I imagine, and I think that there's enough resources in Nova Scotia that is possible. I think that there is enough stories that we all could become famous, maybe not to the level, that we want to, that will become celebrities or anything like that. But, there's enough stuff that, that we've got to share to the world. So I really would like to see more space being created, and that everybody gets to have, something that is significant for them.
Excellent. Ryan?
Yeah, I think my utopia is based on trusting relationships, and everybody can and does collaborate and work together and trust, whether it's organizations or communities or cultural communities or disability communities. And I saw a great meme going around online the other day about crabs in the bucket, because you hear people talk a lot about that in Nova Scotia in lots of different ways. Crabs in the bucket, everyone competing and competing for resources and maybe pulling each other down in order to try to get the resources yourself or for your company. And it was talking about, crabs don't do that when there is no bucket, right? When crabs are in the ocean, they're just in the ocean having a great time.
Right.
So to me, how do we dissipate this bucket and just become, helpful, happy crabs in the ocean, collaborating with each other in a balanced ecosystem. So, yeah. So those trusting relationships, I think, how do we get there is the most essential thing to me, and that is utopia. I think if we get there.
Dale?
We will. Well, I sort of like the idea of a model of, not even a model, care. We go through our lives, we try to do the best we can. We come from different perspective, different backgrounds, different genders. And I just feel like, coming from the visual arts and being an artist myself and art educator, artists are cool. They do cool things. They put themselves on the edge. They risk. Not all of them, but I think I've seen such remarkable artists, and we need to diversify the artists that we work with, connect with. Artists need to be part of our lives. We need to see the artists within ourselves and the ability we have within ourselves to be creative, to discover, be imaginative in everything we do, no matter where we come from. So I think it's like caring for one another and realizing that we have different ways and different choices as we move through our life, or we should have different choices and opportunities, but everyone should have opportunities to have a whole variety of art experiences that make them feel like they're actualized, like that they can do it. They're not. They have a right. I love this utopia. I think it's soon. I think it's happening.
Yeah, I think, besides having an industry and a province where like everyone who wants to work is able to work, feeling fulfilled in that way and like constantly, I'm excited for the day. I mean, in my life, I've done some queer activism, and I think there's like this notion that people are excited where like you don't have to come out. Coming out isn't a thing, you just are. So I'm really excited in the film industry specifically for like diversity to not be making headlines for the sake of diversity, for it to just be good content, right? Like I don't want Diggstown to get a news article written about it because it's a predominantly black cast set in Halifax. I want it to get headlines because it's an incredible show, right? I don't want I Hear You to be making waves because it's telling women's stories. Right. I want it to just be good content. So I'm excited for that day. And I think like you said, Dale, we're slowly getting there. We're starting to see that a little bit, but we have a long way to go. Yeah. Long way to go.
Yeah, at this point, we're still so excited to see it when it happens that we can't help but to exclaim. You know, like we have to go, oh, look what it is.
Yeah, the representation
because it's so obvious.
Yeah. I've never seen that on screen.
Yeah, so I agree. Once we get to a point where we don't even consider responding to what we're seeing, that will be a good day.
Yeah, it's just like, oh, look, girl in a wheelchair, instead of me going, oh, look, a girl in a wheelchair. I haven't seen that in a decade. Yeah. So, thanks, everybody. And now I'm going to turn it over to my lovely co-worker, Mara, who's going to give us some questions from cyberspace. What do you got, Mara?
I am ready to do that. I'm not sure where I should stand. Over here? Okay. Hi. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. All right, sweet. All right, I'm going to stand over here on the carpet. All right. This feels very bold.
Ooh. Center.
Hi, folks. So I'm going to throw to some questions from cyberspace first, since we have great listeners out there with excellent questions, and then we'll see what we've got here in-house. So if you're here in-house and you have any questions, you can start percolating about that now. I won't put you on the spot too soon. So the first question that came through that I wanted to highlight is, one of our viewers/listeners asked, is anyone doing a project of mentorship specifically with folks with disabilities? So I know we heard sort of about general, inclusion mentorships and things, but I think focusing on the part of inclusion that is disability. Yeah. Does anyone want to take that or have any thoughts about that? Even if you don't have a project, maybe a project you want to have?
For sure.
Yeah.
So, at Screen Nova Scotia, like I said, we do diversity internship programs. Diversity also includes, obviously, persons with disabilities who can and should apply to our internship programs. What then happens is that selected participants are then, they're selected, and then we have to go off and we have to find productions that are interested in taking interns on. Now, Screen Nova Scotia is paying for the cost of paying the intern. So the production itself doesn't get anything for it other than, knowing that they're supporting to the growth of the community, which is the reason why most people do it, obviously. So I would say, just because of the nature of how we're doing it, if we get applications for individuals that might have disabilities that can't be accommodated by a production right now, that's something we're gonna bump up against, but something we're very interested in bumping up against, right? Because we want to see, okay, we've got somebody here, let's find a production and find a way, right? That's how you go forward, right? You just make it happen. So we are aware that there's probably lots of opportunities that we're going to have to bump up against in the near future as we move, hopefully this will become an annual project and we'll have more and more interns coming through it, and hopefully we'll see more applications from persons with disabilities, and we'll be able to accommodate them by working with the production to do so.
Right.
Your point of like what you might bump up against, though, is really prominent. I know within my work, some of the work that we're doing right now, I'm actually trying to put together the jury for the Merit Awards, where they travel across the province throughout the entire year, basically from one end of the province to the other, seeing professional shows and jurying them for the awards. And made a very conscious kind of effort around who we're putting on that jury. And one of the things that quickly I ran against was the infrastructure in some of the venues, as well as the accessibility in the programming. So I actually had to take a step back and say, before I can bring more people into the room and really address those things, there's some stuff within just the infrastructure and the programming that is happening across Nova Scotia, and some awareness and education building that needs to happen. Even before we get to that mentoring step, as much as I want to, and I'm looking at putting that mentoring in other areas, making sure that, if I'm going to encourage folks to go out to a venue, that they are safe. So not that just that they are able to be there, or that, some measures have been made, but they are safe in those measures and they feel included, not just in watching a production, but how do they get there and how do they get home as well.
Yeah. I love that point in both of your cases. I think that sort of point is sometimes we don't know what the problem is until people put themselves out there in terms of the accessibility. Like if a person comes forward to you and says, I want to do this program, then you discover what the barrier is that you wouldn't have known necessarily, because we've had so little inclusion in a lot of these spaces that we don't know the ways in which they are really barriered.
Yeah, I guess, just to add to that point, because I am trying to really encourage the audience here and the listeners to apply to this program, because there's many, many projects that happen in Nova Scotia. It's not just the big ones that you see flashing across the news. There's a number of, unscripted documentary style projects that are happening. I think there was 61 projects that were approved through the incentive program this year. 61 projects is a lot. And within that, we will find a way to accommodate in some way.
For some context too, I think out of those 61, we probably had 5
Right.
that were like large scale union productions. So like the small stuff that's happening is crazy. And I mean, from our perspective too, we represent 18 different departments that do wildly different things, from hair and makeup to gripping, like lugging sandbags and stands. Like it's so difficult. And then when you compare that to the wide range of disabilities that there are, I think we would be open, like Laura said, to placing people. It's just finding the shoe that fits, right?
Sweet.
Yeah.
I think it's a little bit different maybe, but we have a number of long-standing programs that have been in the community. We're partnership programs. So one of those is Autism Arts. So we work with Autism Nova Scotia and community. And there's another program called Artful Afternoon, where we work with the Alzheimer's Society and care partners. And I think that way of working, which some of these programs have been, worked with Phoenix too for over 20 years, 17 years, 18 years, and we've been growing right from the beginning together, growing the programming and understanding some of the challenges. And in terms of even mentorships, some of the people that have been involved, they're very multi-layered, these programs. So some of them have gone on to become involved in the actual programs. And in most cases, you know, they might be a volunteer, maybe they've gone to school, they're on the spectrum, but we're, again, working towards having more paid internships, more paid, and I call them co-mentorships, because really we're learning from one another, right? It's not, the learning isn't going one way. But I think that gives kind of a richness, knowing that these kinds of programs, working with partners, there's so many multi-layers to them. And it's really important that we think about, especially some of these that are working with youth, where they're transitioning into their early adult years and they're trying to figure out what they want to do. I'd like to see, that support for someone who's been in our autism program for, let's say, all through their childhood up to their early 20s. Hey, they have a lot of knowledge. They have lived experience, plus they have content experience. So really trying to encourage that. But I think that partnership really adds that richness, because we don't have the knowledge at the gallery necessarily about autism or all the different things in their lives, nor have the same community. There's so many people that are involved with Autism Nova Scotia. So it's really worked well. But again, a lot of work to be done in terms of getting paid and people maybe even on staff that are involved. We have done that through afternoon artful, I'll start with Artful Afternoon Shift, which is the program with young people with that are having challenges with mental health. The artists are all in their sort of 20s, 30, and some of them have, and as many people do, challenges in that way. And there's been a lot of training. I know Wonderneath has done an excellent job with a lot of training of the artists, and they're paid positions, and they're getting trauma care, like training and those kinds of things, and they're being well paid. And so that's really exciting. I think it's really important in terms of moving forward. I think this is really rich, building who we work with, and communities can then see, and people coming to attend these programs see themselves there. They say, oh, there's someone on the spectrum and they're working and they're getting paid and they're doing a great job, and I don't even, So
Yeah. I love the idea of co-mentorship in terms of we need to pay people to show up in our spaces and work with us and bring their brilliance and ingenuity. And then we figure out what our blind spots are, and our organizations get better and the work gets better and more interesting. And we're not asking for another person to sort of volunteer to train us, as we've been highlighting has been a big problem. So another question we just got from the audience is, I've noticed as a person working on film sets and in theater that there's a lack of diversity in the off-screen, off-stage positions. And what are we going to do to change that? Does anyone have any thoughts about changing that aspect of things? Sometimes it's easier to have the actor be the representation of diversity or inclusion than it is to have them trained in the other parts of the work. Yeah, right.
I'll just jump in. I actually think when there's such significant barriers and the problems are so systemic, I think actually for me, the mentorship or the training, the part where we need to mentor and make sure people are in positions is at the executive director level, at the CEO level, at the board chair level. Because I think we can do training programs to have people behind the scenes, behind camera, on tech. That's all needs to happen for sure. But I actually think it's going to be when someone has the power, again, like Lemieux was saying, if you're in charge of everything, and you have lived experience with a disability, it's going to be much easier to just make everyone roll out a whole variety of programs that will be super useful. So as well as all the training programs that we can all get some funding for and do some of that, it's what about the executive training and the leadership for the behind the scenes stuff I was talking about? That's maybe less, like you said, you don't see it as much, but it runs everything. That's where all the decisions get made about what kind of program are we even going to try to do. So to me, it's that executive training. How do we do that? And then I think we can follow with the other things. We can do the other things as well, but the big changes will happen when all the bosses have better lived experience.
Exactly, the producers, when they start putting together their teams.
Yeah, the producer,
exactly.
How do you train that executive producer?
Starts at that level. Yeah.
But if we're thinking about that utopian world, I'm always sort of feeling like we need to, I know we need leaders and we need people decision, all those things. But I think we could do way better in terms of flattening that hierarchy, in terms of leadership and giving people a better sense, and it can often just be through the language, that the executive team might use, talking to the people that are working in the organization. I think that shared leadership model, or sort of empowering people so that there's not, in a lot of institutions, still there's, a lot of power at the top.
Yeah.
And I think if we're really going to make true change, and, I work in a great environment, but it's interesting. It's a hard one. And I've been at the gallery for a long time, and I feel very comfortable there. But I just think there's so much talent. There's got to be leadership at every level, really. And I don't know how to get there exactly, because we need to make decisions and need to be efficient. But I think we really need to look at this sort of the whole system of leadership and organizations, and how we're not using a lot of the ability that a lot of the workers have outside of their main responsibilities in terms of making decisions.
I think one of the ways that we get there is we slow down. If we are in executive roles or leadership roles, we slow down and we look for opportunities to really make sure that everyone who's around us, our staff, our colleagues, they understand why we're doing things, not just that we are doing an activity, but the reasoning behind it, because that's actually how you teach and how you learn. And so really not just making those slower conscious choices, but making sure that the people around us are seeing what we're doing and understanding how all those cogs fit together within the organization.
Yeah.
We're all one little moment within a larger sequence of events. So knowing how we all connect, and that is skills transference, and that is how kind of we welcome people into those executive roles or into those backstage roles, so that we really do start to improve the diversity and the representation that's going on.
And people feeling valued. I think that's what bottom line. I think what you're saying about you need someone that's going to sort of see that larger view, but people need to feel like they're part of that.
I mean,
It's
specifically,
sorry.
yeah, specifically in the film industry. I mean, one thing that, and to answer the question about, bringing people, onto set, not in front of camera, which I think was the question.
Yeah, that was the question.
One of the things that we really need to do is exactly what Tara said, is get out there and go to the communities and introduce ourselves. I mean, the film industry seems inaccessible to just about everybody, let alone the people that we've historically oppressed. So Screen Nova Scotia is preparing to do a road show in 2022. And so we'll be taking, you remember this? We'll be taking, hopefully Jake's going to come with us.
Too. We've been talking about this as well. Like, it's really accessing the communities that don't, everyone, but being targeted.
But we'll target African Nova Scotia communities. We'll target Indigenous communities. We'll target rural communities.
Right.
Well, and this is specifically the point, right? And taking with us the leaders in the institutions to go in and shake hands and say, hey, please do come, here's what we have to offer. Here's how we'd like to help you. Here's how we can support you, specifically you, not just, and not the Screen Nova Scotia or not the screen industry that, typically has been incredibly inaccessible. Here's the new film industry and here's how you can access it. So that's going to take obviously work. It's the reason why we haven't done it yet. Thinking about that, thinking about what it looks like, developing the relationships and understanding how to go into these communities is just one piece of it. What is how are we going to tailor the information so that it makes sense for the community for whom we're speaking to? We don't want to bring a carnival with us. We want to bring people who can specifically give very clear direction on a path into the film industry, right? So,
and I think a challenge I see there that is interesting, and I kind of want to put back on your plate is, we have African Nova Scotia communities, we have Indigenous communities. People with disabilities are spread out all over the place, and they aren't always well organized in community. Often there's a lot of isolation too. So trying to reach people who are systematically excluded from community and make sure that they know that we want to hear your voices. We have jobs, we have opportunities, we have accessibility programs. I think that poses a challenge that we don't even always know how to work with. But I'll be interested to see how you approach it.
Yeah, me too.
It's a model like not what is it now? Not for us, by us. Don't do anything. Nothing about us without us. Yeah. That whole idea. I mean, how are you gonna? You know.
Yeah.
Well, I just lost my mic.
Sometimes you just need to do it, right? Sometimes you just need to go do it, right? Rather than spending too much time thinking about, obviously you want it to be, you want there to be practical takeaways. You want there to be measurable results. But we've spent a lot of time thinking about things and we
Need
really
to go
just
do.
need to,
Yeah.
it's time to just start
Really
doing.
excited because we identified that was something that we needed to do like pre-pandemic, early 20, like January 2020. We were like, cool, we need to go like not only like from a diversity perspective, but like high schools, like we need to start doing outreach because we saw things coming and so we've like been percolating, and it's hard to go into communities during the time, right? So like now that things are seemingly starting to open up, we're like gearing up, and we're really excited.
Yeah. We have to get back to phone trees and things like that too, because some of those folks out in the rural places don't have internet. Yeah.
Absolutely.
I wanted to make a comment.
Oh, Mia, there you are. Hi.
Hi.
It's so hard to like jump in when you're.
Yes, sorry.
The screen.
No,
Go
it's
ahead.
okay. Like, I just wanted to, just on these points, like representation is so important. And so, for the folks that we know who do kind of advocate and are, so if you're looking at this, keep looking at folks that are from the communities and have the lived experience, like have they made things, and can they be the ones to go and tell the stories like tours for them? Because, for example, even like, I've made this documentary, Freedom Swell, and that was an incredible experience. And so I think, it's been really cool to be able to now know that I completed a project like that. And then also to be able to speak to other, youth and people about what that process is like, because it's nothing like hearing it from someone who looks like you or who has a similar experience. And even if it's not necessarily like always the right fit, but just seeing someone who is from that community or has that lived experience is so important. And I think sometimes we don't give enough opportunities to people who actually have that lived experience. And so, even just like a challenge would be, the budgets or the monies that we have to do outreach. Like, what if it was programmed with an organization that's already kind of doing something like, with that population and giving them opportunity to create something? I just think that there's so many new ways that we can think outside of the box in terms of being having representation and actually, working with folks who experience the challenges to be the ones to say, I did this and this is how, and this is how you can do it, and I know that that's like takes more work sometimes, but it's so much more credible in a way.
Yeah, it's more credible and it's way more inspiring.
Yeah.
And not just inspiring in sort of the like classic like disability inspiration story way, but more like practical, like this is real. We're not just saying we welcome you. People have made films. Here's someone who made a film. This is how they did it. I think that's the way we're going to reach people. Yeah. Okay, I am going to take an audience question now. I don't know the logistics of that, so I'm going to walk towards the audience and figure out what happens. Do we have anyone out here who wants to ask a question? All right, we got one over here. I'm going to make my way over and put my mask back on. 1 second. Very fiddly world that we live in. Okay, here. Hi.
Hello.
You want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, my name's Alana. I was the girl who walked in front and made a whole scene, so sorry about that. So what are you doing to make it more affordable for people with disabilities to access art spaces and to make accessibility more affordable? Because ASL and audio description can be expensive for creators.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, so who wants to take this one? Did you hear the question?
Can we get the last part of this question again?
Yeah, so the question was, how are you making it more affordable for creators to be accessible? Like ASL and audio description can be very expensive. So people who want to make accessible projects, do you know of any ways in which that's being supported?
There's direct funding now that you can get to offset those costs. There's a lot of new projects that I've seen that have accessed that funding through West Nova Scotia, through accessibility for the city. There's provincial money, Canada Council money, and that directly goes to those costs because they now recognize there's a need. I just want to do a quick shout out to a theater creator who made it's almost like a flip book. Remember those Fisher Price back in the day flip books? And so you can download the audio and then flip through, but you can. There's also image descriptions and whatnot. So she received a grant to do that and pay for those costs. So there's definitely some grants out there.
Did that answer your question?
Yeah, that's
okay.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. Anyone else out here? How are we feeling? Oh, I got one over here maybe? Question? Did you have a question? Oh, all right. I've got one here. Yep.
Hi, thank you. I don't think the microphone's working.
Is the microphone not working?
It's not.
It is working. It is?
I can't.
Yeah, just getting close.
Okay, I just have a quick question. I'm just wondering if there's anyone on any of your leadership teams that actually identifies as a person having a disability, and if no, why not?
Ooh, I like that one. Good job, person.
So, anyone want to speak to that question? How's that going? How's that make everyone feel? The question was, is there anyone on your leadership team that identifies as having a disability? And if not, then what are you doing about it?
I'll speak to that. So I was, one of my staff members came in the other day and we were talking about programming. And we were talking about self-identification within our programming, within our membership, within our staffing structures and our leadership structures. And the fact that within TNS, Theatre Nova Scotia, we have not previously asked for that. So I can't answer that question because I don't have any data on that. But that was something that we actually recognized that we have not been tracking. And that is our bad. We should be giving people opportunities to be self-identifying so that we can then, put in designated program if we want to, but also to make sure that we are actually doing what we're striving to do, which is to bring people into the room, to be representative, to be inclusive. And if we're not tracking that data, then we can't say that we're doing that.
Yeah.
Right.
I'd like to echo your statement, Kat. Yeah, that's same. We mid 2020, we really realized that we haven't been tracking anything. I know because of my relationships with certain members that we do have members with disabilities, both physical and not. We do have people of color, very few, and that, but it's not identified anywhere. It's just hey, I know you, cool. To my knowledge, we don't have anybody on our executive that have self-identified as having a disability, but yeah, so that's one thing that we're actually in 2022, we're planning on doing an overhaul of how we track that information. Because we get shows like Digstown, like other shows that are coming in that are prioritizing diversity in many ways. And we can't give them a list of our members that are people of color, that are disabled, that are, even women. We don't have that data, right? So out of our 400 members and 500 plus other folk, we just don't have that.
So Screen Nova Scotia launched a production guide, a database of individuals that are working in the film industry last year. And I mentioned earlier, but this is a place where anybody who identifies as having a disability can do so. And, the point of having self-identifiers is, numerous, but, one obviously is in just increasing discoverability of, people that do self-identify as being diverse, and of course that's for the reason so that in the film industry right now, there are benchmarks in networks and financing that say you have to have a number of diverse individuals on your set. So of course we want to help that happening, but it's also so that local creators can help. They can find partners with that first voice to help tell their story. And help to bring that community together to do that. So we launched it, I think, late last year. it'd be a year now, I think, since we launched it. Still working on populating it. I think there's still a little bit of a hesitancy in Nova Scotia to want to self-identify in that way. People are still going to be
Absolutely.
yeah. There's still a hesitancy, and that's obviously understandable. I think we've got a long ways to go, in terms of making it people feel safe to do that. Film sets are not necessarily the safest place to be. They're quite toxic, actually. There's a lot of work that needs to be done to change, to create a culture shift in the film industry. And I can only speak to the film industry, but I have to assume, most industry, I think theater people are more woke, but I don't know. But yeah, I think it's a really interesting tool to have to kind of measure who wants to identify, and because it tells us a little bit about the narrative of what's going on out there, right?
Well, it's so interesting too that like prior to us making this discovery, and I think there was a very definite shift in more than just the arts, but like that self-identification aspect of things. Like prior to like 2020, we have a diversity statement that clearly states that nobody shall, I think it's our diversity statement. Nobody shall be discriminated against on any means, period, point blank. So by us not collecting that information, we thought we were doing a service. Like we were doing our members and people who work in the industry a favor by not. It's not something that we collect. Therefore, it can't be a factor for you being hired on a show, right? But things change.
Yeah, I'd like to piggyback on that because if someone's in the room that can like help me unpack this a little bit. So before then, also, I think it was illegal. Like you actually couldn't ask those questions because you couldn't be discriminated against to be hired as an employee. I myself, I'm an undiagnosed mad artist. I felt it out my whole life, but I've just never been diagnosed. But everything that I hear, I know it's me. So I'm quite happy with that fact and quite proud to actually own that. But yeah, I believe that it was illegal to even have those things, and I believe that there's new with government change that now we're trying to pull out those indicators. But I think it was illegal.
So I think that's a really interesting thing to talk about, right? Yeah. Like the fact that it used to be illegal because there was fear of discrimination, right. And now we're trying to move to the opposite end of the spectrum, which is, give me visibility so that I can,
actually make it.
Well, yeah, and honor that and use it, right? Like there's no need, don't hide.
Yeah.
But
it's interesting that's a culture shift that we're seeing. That's very clear, right? And I think that is moving in the right direction, right? Like now it's not pick me because everything about me is anonymous. Pick me because of these things, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Lamia wants to.
Lamia. I was just gonna grab you, Lamia. I promise. Hi.
Well, I think that the shift that is happening, I think is in some ways still not the right one if we don't have representation at the levels. And so, I think for me, what I'm seeing in, the industries is that, no, we don't have enough folks on our board who are representative of those communities and of the communities that we want to serve, or representative of the public. And so for me, as someone who's new to the theater industry, it's been very, I would say that I've learned a lot. I've actually seen a whole lot more ASL in theater than I have anywhere else. And so, there's parts of my excitement that I see now that there is such an opportunity, and how beautiful is it, when theater productions include ASL. And I've been able to kind of see that it be possible and it become a priority. And so I guess from my role as an executive director and also as a chairperson, it's like now I'm on to thinking about how to do that development wise in terms of even having young people consider that as a career, because I think there's lots of people who are young people who know that it's so important now. But it's like, there's a whole new generation of folk who, and I think about youth who are, in, different communities that are so proud of who they are and are so embraced, and I want them to have jobs. I want them to be the ones that are the future, basically. So I'm just, in a space of learning, but I think for me, I like the idea of not being diagnosed. All of those things are really real right now, but I would have to answer the question, no, we do not have enough representation, and that and our teams and folks are really paying attention to how to bring more folks into our network to be able to hear how we can serve better and how we can make it safe, because it's not so much about getting folks there, it's about actually keeping, having the shared language, doing the development. So I would say that I'm right in the beginning stages of it, and I'm really looking forward to all of the ways that, that it's going to open up, that we're going to teach each other and learn.
Thank you, Lamia. I love that sense of both. It's not just about bringing people in; it's also about making spaces safe and ready as well, so that we aren't setting people up to just kind of breeze through and not feel like it went well, which definitely happens. And I also, this message where I'm hearing for everybody is like, we haven't been collecting this. We also don't know who in our organizations has disabilities, and there's been really good reason for people to not want to share that. And we have to be ready. We can't just be telling people, oh yeah, we want you to disclose. This is going to be good for you, if we aren't ready for it to actually be good for people when they disclose, right?
Exactly.
For sure. So we're almost at time, but I have one last question I wanted to see if a few people wanted to touch on quickly. I'll just take two people who want to answer this one, which is someone from the internet asked, how do I access your organization? Are your businesses accessible? Does anyone, I know some of you don't work exactly in a business in that sense. You work in a more diffuse space, but does anyone want to speak to whether you feel like where you're operating is accessible at this point?
Do you mean the physical location or the marketing kind of material?
I think the physical location.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm very happy to say that our office is accessible. To my knowledge, I'm able-bodied, so I'm able to walk through the doors and everything else. So, but from what I've been told, and I know that in terms of the spacing, we do very much consciously think about wheelchair use in terms of our space that way. We think about various mobility devices and how they might move through our spaces. We do have accessible parking immediately on the outside of our building, the building being the Cultural Federations of Nova Scotia down on Marginal Road. Accessible washrooms within the space. We do have 2 levels. Our upstairs level, our boardroom, unfortunately, is not accessible, but we have a secondary meeting space on the main floor as well. So to my knowledge, from my own experience, yes, ours is. But while our office spaces, I know many of the theatres across Nova Scotia are not, and especially when you start looking at the backstage of theatres across Nova Scotia.
Absolutely. Yeah, that thing of you can come be in the audience, but you can't get in the dressing room, you can't get on and off the stage. We're still facing a lot of that, right?
We have a lot of performers, a lot of very, very talented performers and technicians as well who can't get into the venues because of that reason.
Thanks. Ryan, I'm going to take you last. What do you got to say?
Yeah, this building that we're in, we're fortunate that the infrastructure we're building this Lighthouse Arts Center in is accessible at the broadest level, right? Elevators and ramps and everything like that. So it's really exciting that we'll be able to say yes to that question at a basic level. However, I'm sure we need to do some digging in as we start to, we're almost going to be buying furniture and getting into all that soon. Yeah. So what does an accessible desk look like in the co-working space, right? So we haven't had those conversations yet. So to me, that's our next kind of challenge is great, we have elevators, but all the next steps of making sure, once you're inside, cool, what's the experience like inside to be able to work there? So, for me,
wayfinding signs, all that kind of stuff. Yeah,
I'm really glad to have these questions, honestly, because Tara, we can put our heads together later and be like, all right, cool, what did we learn today, and what do we need to make sure we do before April 1st when we open up? That this could be a fantastic place to work for a whole variety of people.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and coming from that person's question, I think. One part of it that I'm just going to leave with everyone, I think, is part of the question was, how do I know if your business is accessible? And I think that's a lot of us are walking around going, this space is fine. Well, yeah, but does someone have to be a sleuth to figure it out? So how are we going to communicate better right up front on our websites and in our invites to events? And all? I think we're all getting better at it, but there's still a long way to go in terms of communicating accessibility so people know whether something's for them or not.
Yeah. I think the big thing is you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
And we all have those massive gaps, and so we really have to, take the time and listen to people and say, okay, what am I missing? What did I not see, or what did I not do, or what did I do that I could do better next time?
Thank you, Kat. I love that. Let's end on that. We don't know what we don't know. So that's our time. I want to thank all our panelists. I want to thank Vicki very much, Vicki Levac, for being our host. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. I want more of these, please.
Yes, let's keep doing it. Yeah, absolutely.
I didn't suck at it, so please let me do it again.
Yay. Vicki, you did amazing. Thank you. We're so excited to have you here and all of our wonderful panelists, and we'll keep asking these questions, and hopefully we'll keep having better answers every year.
Yeah.
Let's do that. Okay. So thank you to everyone who tuned in, and that's it for our mini BAF for this year, and we'll be back in the spring, yeah?
Yeah, bye.
Woohoo! Let's do this. Bye, everybody.